The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
This hour, we're going to focus our attention on public education, and as you begin to see some of the problems, you'll see the real argument for school choice. And we bring to the microphone Lance Izumi, who is the Senior Director of the Pacific Research Institute Center for Education, an individual that you probably know from some of his books. Probably the best known is the series of books, Not As Good As You Think. For example, The Myth of the Middle Class, and a variety of others that fit into that category, as well as Moonshots in Education, Obama's Educational Takeover. But we're going to focus on this book today, The Corrupt Classroom: Bias, Indoctrination, Violence, and Social Engineering Show Why America Needs School Choice. Lance is an individual that has actually graduated, first of all, from UCLA, has a master's degree in political science from the University of California at Davis. Of course, he has his law degree from USC School of Law. Served for 5 years as a commissioned officer in the California State Military Reserve. You also probably know him as an individual, especially for our California listeners, as an individual who was a chief speechwriter and director of writing and research for, at that time, the California governor, George Duke Machen, and then later served in the administration of President Ronald Reagan as a speechwriter for the Attorney General Edwin Meese, to mention just a few. And Lance Izumi, we appreciate the good work you're doing, and thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Well, thanks so much, Kerby. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be on your show.
Well, it's always great to have you here with us. And one of the things I thought we might do before we get into some of the specifics of your book is, in the introduction, you point out that sometimes the argument that people make for school choice is, well, the public school kids are not doing very well, and the kids that are in parochial schools, private schools, charter schools, other kinds of things are doing better. And that's reason enough. But I get the sense that this book is also to say, well, it isn't just that they're not doing well academically, but if you're concerned about things like, I don't know, gangs or bullying, or maybe lax discipline, or teachers with an ideological bias, those are all compelling reasons too. Is that fair?
That's an absolutely fair assessment of the book, Kerby. I mean, throughout my career, and you kind of mentioned this in your introduction of me, I've spent a lot of time looking at the performance of kids, academic performance. And when you talk about academic performance, a lot of times you're talking about test scores. So I've spent a lot of time doing research on, schools, their test scores on core subjects such as math and English. And, it turns out that many schools, even those in middle class and more affluent areas, as my series, Not As Good As You Think, looked at, that those schools are not doing very well in those core subjects. And so therefore, that parents, if they find out that their kids are not proficient in math or English, they should have that opportunity to have a school choice too, whether that's education savings account, a tuition tax credit, or a voucher, or some other means to go to a higher performing school in the private sector, whether that's a religious school, an independent school, or a public charter school. They should have that opportunity. But the thesis of my book, The Corrupt Classroom, is that those aren't the only things that parents are making their decisions on.
Yes.
Yes. Sometimes they're saying that, hey, my kid isn't getting the type of education in the core subjects, but other times they're saying, hey, my kid is being picked on by other kids at school. My kid has a teacher who is picking on him or her. My kid has a teacher who's biased against the types of views my child has. The school is teaching values that don't agree with our family, or else the school is actually biased when they teach things such as sex ed or religion or some of these very hot button issues. And so those have really nothing to do with whether your kid is being able to add 2 + 2 = 4 or not. That has a lot to do with values, the safety of your child, all these non-academic, non-performance issues. And so, really, if you were to ask parents, I think, across the United States, what kinds of things bother them the most about what's happening at their school, I think you'd probably find that those who have a problem with what's going on at their neighborhood public school, it would be a lot of them would be these non-academic factors.
I would think. Yeah, I would certainly say that. Yes. And and one of the things I find so interesting is everybody says, I think the public schools are really bad, but the one that my child goes to is okay until you start pointing out some of the problems. And then or you even start asking, well, has they have any problems with, an unsafe environment? You haven't had any problems with a bias against them? Have you ever felt that maybe they're teaching too much sex in the schools? And then they start saying, well, yeah, I guess so. And so then it's kind of like, again, where the light goes on. True?
Yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely true. I think that, a lot of times, in fact, parents don't even know, for example, how their school stacks up academically. I mean, they don't know, that their school, what the test scores really are. They may know what their kids scored on a test, but, if the school is just giving out A's like dessert, and, then, they think that their school is just doing fine, regardless of what maybe the state test scores might say. But they do know if their kid, as I say, is gotten into a fight on the playground. They do know, for example, if their kid comes home with homework assignments that seem politically biased, and they do know if their teacher's picking on their child or if their teacher is, pushing viewpoints that don't agree with the families. Those are the sorts of things that do come up at the family dinner table, and those are the things that parents do know about, and that's the thing that I think irritates them to the point where a lot of them would like to have that other choice rather than being forced just by the fact they live in a particular neighborhood to send their kid to the local public school.
And I might just mention before we get into some of the specifics that your chapters are broken down into looking at the political and intellectual and ideological bias in the classroom, some of the unsafe issues that you've already alluded to, fiscal mismanagement, which, again, we wouldn't even tolerate a business being run as poorly as some of the schools, then the sexualization of the classroom, and then religious bias. So those are kind of the 5 areas. But also one of the things I appreciate, Lance, about what you do in your books is there's almost 30 pages of endnotes. So if somebody's sitting here saying, he says that, but is that really true? You can go and find that endnote, look it up, and go, well, that's exactly what that journal said. That's exactly what that analysis said. That's exactly what that newspaper said. And so I think it's going to be a very good valuation. So we need to take one of our mandatory breaks, so let's do that. We come back, for those of you who maybe want to take some notes, you might kind of number from 1 to 5. We're going to look first at the kind of the political bias in the classroom, then unsafe environments, number 3, fiscal mismanagement, number 4, sexualization of the classroom, and then number 5, kind of a religious bias. Some of this we've covered before, but as he is so wont to do, Lance Izumi does a very good job of kind of summarizing that. And if you find yourself saying, okay, I got to get the book, but we have a link to the website and a link also to Amazon, so you can find it there. You can get it in paperback or Kindle. It's very inexpensive, and it would be a book that I think you would want to read if you have a young person in a classroom, if you know somebody that's on a school board, or maybe somebody that's running for the school board, or maybe somebody that's part of a PTA. You might want to buy more than one of these books and hand them out. And, of course, it makes the case for school choice, so if you know maybe legislators who haven't really thought about this or maybe have a bias for or against school choice, I want to put one of those in their hands as well. Let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation with Lance Izumi about the corrupt classroom right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
More and more Americans believe in pluralism, and many believe in universalism. First, let me define the terms. Universalism would be the belief that everyone will be saved after death and go to heaven. Pluralism is the belief that all faith positions and belief systems are equally true or essentially true. According to a Barna survey, Americans are still not embracing universalism. A majority of Americans still believe in exclusive views rather than inclusive views concerning heaven. Those surveyed were asked if they agreed or disagreed with a statement, quote, all people will experience the same outcome after death regardless of their religious beliefs, unquote. Americans disagreed with the statement by 55%. The survey shows that Americans still reject the idea that everyone is saved, but the declining percentages suggest that universalism may become the dominant theological view in the next few years. Given the influence of tolerance and political correctness, it is reasonable to assume that universalism will become more prevalent over time. What about pluralism? The survey asked if Americans agreed or disagreed with this statement, quote, it doesn't matter what religious faith you follow because they all teach the same lesson, unquote. A majority disagreed with the statement, although 43% agreed with the statement. The study also found that 59% of adults believe that Christians and Muslims worship the same God even though they have different names and beliefs regarding God, and the study also found that 43% believe that the Bible, the Quran, and the Book of Mormon are all different expressions of the same spiritual truths. Pluralism is already becoming the dominant theology of Americans. Pastors and Christian leaders should take note and address the influence of pluralism in our world today. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Affirm Films, Paul, Apostle of Christ, starring Jim Caviezel, rated PG-13, now playing. Information at paulmovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Privileged to have with us today Lance Izumi, and again, he is the author of the book The Corrupt Classroom, and an individual, of course, is the senior director at the Pacific Research Institute there in California. And we might focus for a few minutes on the political and ideological bias in the classroom. And Lance, on Fridays, we have Kelly Shackelford with us with First Liberty, and oftentimes before he comes in, he'll share with us some of the stories that we're going to talk about. And some of these stories of religious liberty or other issues, you just think, this has got to be a joke. This sounds like something out of a Saturday Night Live sketch or from The Onion. This couldn't possibly be true. And as I started reading through your book about some of the what's called the Trump effect, all the different anti-Trump kinds of things that are happening in the classroom just in the last year, I would tend to think, oh, these have to be a joke if it weren't for the fact that at least a few of these we've reported here on Point of View. And when you put them all together, you realize again that some of these teachers are spending a tremendous amount of time not teaching basic education, but using the platform in the classroom to run down the President of the United States. Tell us more.
Well, that's absolutely right, Kerby. They're using, these teachers, unfortunately, are using their classrooms as a pulpit, their political pulpit, in order to basically propagandize their students about that teacher's anti-Trump views. And it's not just these views, it's the fact that in many cases they're very extreme views. And so, to the extent, for example, when you say that it's almost... this can't be true. I point out some of the more absurd examples, such as a teacher who is in New Hampshire, who actually puts on a Donald Trump wig, turns on the tape recorder to play a profane anti-Trump rap song, and that teacher starts to dance in the classroom in front of all the students to this anti-Trump song. And one of the parents of the kids in that class was shocked and said that it's not as if this teacher was a sociology teacher. This was a geometry teacher who was doing this in their class.
Yes.
I mean, and so what kind of what sort of thing is motivating that teacher, except for the fact that they just have this blatant need to politicize their classroom, regardless of the subject they're teaching. There's not even a thin connection between that activity and what they're supposed to be teaching. Another teacher in Colorado, for example, put a cutout face of President Trump on a piñata, and then encouraged all the students to take a whack at the piñata. And one of the parents of one of the kids in that class said, why divide people? Why, this is a school. You should be bringing people together. Why do this type of activity to divide students and divide the people? And which is a very good question. And why are teachers being allowed to do this sort of thing? And I think that what's important to understand, though, is that it's not just these kind of individual anecdotal stories about this teacher here or that teacher there. This type of bias against President Trump, and also bias in favor of a liberal/left agenda, is very deep-seated within the public education system. You have the national teachers unions plus state and local unions that are pushing the line that President Trump is a racist and a sexist, a xenophobe, and so that is going out throughout their membership and seeping into the classrooms across this country. And it doesn't matter whether it's a blue state, red state, purple state, you're seeing this type of bias that is running through so many classrooms throughout the United States.
Well, again, other ones are giving extra credit if they go to an anti-Trump rally, enacting an assassination of the President of the United States. Just imagine if you were to do that for George W. Bush or Barack Obama, and just on. And then the argument that if you're white, you're by definition racist. And I mean, you just have so many examples that I think, again, illustrate that this is not education. And in some cases, it isn't even a close approximation of what is education. So I wish we had more time, but I'm going to keep moving the train down the road, because another one, and perhaps one of the largest chapters, is on unsafe environments. And you have all sorts of issues. Let's start with the obvious one, and that is student-on-student crime. This is of concern, and then we'll get into discipline and safety measures at a time when we're concerned about someone outside of the country or outside of the school coming in, either out of the country as a terrorist act, or maybe it's a fellow former student coming in with a gun. We are reasonably concerned about shootings and other things that are happening. But even inside the school, there's just a lot of school crime that oftentimes isn't getting reported, except, of course, in your book. Tell us more about what you found in that area of research.
Well, I think that, it's shocking to see the crime epidemic that's going on in America's public schools. I report that according to the latest federal statistics, more than 750,000 crimes involving some form of violence occurring on America's public school campuses. And if you think about that number of crimes, or more than 750,000 of those crimes, that translates, if you look at schools by grade level, for example, that means that 9 out of 10 of your public middle schools are reporting crimes on their campuses. And so, this isn't just something that is in particular neighborhoods, where you might think, oh, well, there's a so-called rough school. These are, when you're talking almost 9 out of 10 public middle schools throughout the nation that are reporting these types of crimes,
wow, that
you're talking about your middle class, more affluent areas, where you think that your children are safe, and it turns out that they're not really safe. I give particular examples, beyond the kind of dry statistics. I talk about, for example, a poor little 9-year-old girl in Alabama who is jumped by a bully at school. She's beaten up very badly, has a concussion, is bleeding. the nurse calls the mother into the school and proceeds to tell the mother that not that her daughter was beaten up by a fellow student, but is told by the school personnel that the little 9-year-old girl simply accidentally fell. And thankfully, the little girl was still conscious enough to say, "No, Mama, I told them that this other girl jumped me."
Yes.
And so, you're having not only the terrible crime being committed on this little girl, but it's compounded by the fact that the school is lying about it all.
Well, and the other part of that is that now a lot of these kids have cell phones. So we've all seen the YouTube videos of students fighting. We've seen the situation in which a student just turns around and decks a teacher or wrestles them to the ground or hurts them. And because so many of these kids have cell phones, now we have those records of that. And one other comment I might make before we take a break is you also have a section here about crimes by teachers against students, and that gets into this level of what has been reported really ever since President George W. Bush's administration under Rod Page, just the number of sex crimes that are actually occurring in the schools where teachers, principals, administrators, and others are sexually involved with these underage kids.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, if you look, for example, at just 1 year alone, the 2014 study was done that found that there were almost 800 sex crimes committed by school personnel, mostly teachers, against students. And that's absolutely shocking. And, a lot of it has to do with, you mentioned the technology such as being able to video record things. Well, a lot of it involves sex texting by teachers, for example, with students, and which develops into relationships between teachers and underage students. And so, you're having hundreds and hundreds of these things being these incidents, coming to the attention of the police in 1 year. But what that also says is that there are probably lots of incidents that are not coming to the attention of the police. And so that I would say that is just the tip of the iceberg, because we don't know, how many of those things never make it, into, the police headquarters because no one reports them.
Yes. Well, when you take a break, we'll come back and get into a bit more. Again, there's so much more in each one of these chapters, but we're trying to give you an overview. When we come back, we'll talk about fiscal mismanagement, also the sexualization of the classroom, and, of course, if we have time, a religious bias. That's something we have oftentimes covered with Kelly Shackelford. And if you'd like to join our conversation, some calls coming in, 1-800-351-1212. We'll try to get some of those calls as we talk with Lance Izumi. And if you find yourself saying, okay, I've got to read this for myself, we encourage you to do so. The book is entitled The Corrupt Classroom. Quite readable, well-documented, bias, indoctrination, violence, and social engineering show why America needs school choice. We have some links available at the website, which is ours, pointofview.net. We'll be back with more right after this.
From PureFlix comes God's Not Dead, a light in darkness. Even in life's darkest valleys, a small flame can light the way toward healing and hope.
We are called to be a light in the darkness.
Starring David A.R. White and John Corbett.
God's Not Dead.
God's Not Dead, a light in darkness. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. In theaters March 30th. More information is available at godsnotdead.com.
Christians are called to have answers. Answers for those who doubt our faith and answers for those going through difficult times. Thanks to our Truth Team members, Point of View provides those answers. You can play a vital role in bringing truth to the pressing issues of our day and truth when life doesn't seem fair. Help shine a light in darkness by giving today. Call 800-347-5151 or visit pointofview.net/team. Do not miss or minimize how much of a difference you can make. Take just a couple of minutes and join the Truth Team. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Talking with Lance Izumi today. The book is entitled The Corrupt Classroom, just kind of giving you an analysis of what is happening in education. Of course, he has written many other books as well. Let me commend to you the series, Not As Good As You Think. And also we have a link to pacificresearch.org, which is the Pacific Research Institute. You can sign up there to find out a little bit more about what they're doing. And I would encourage you to certainly get a copy of this book. Let me, as we go along, take an occasional phone call. We may not have time for all the calls. We can get to more of those in the second hour because I want to at least cover this book well with Lance. But let me go to Robert in Texas. I think you had a comment about the anti-Trump bias in the schools. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, the anti-Trump bias, if we were doing this with Obama or something, and of course things would get pretty crazy, I'm sure they'd get racial, and just like this is racial against the whites, if things were getting racial against Obama and the blacks back when he was president, they'd have been trying to prosecute people.
Sure. And again, that's sometimes what I try to do, Lance, turn things around. If this happened for, fill in the blank, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, of course there would be outcry. The fact that you have so many examples, and I'm sure there are many others you did not put in the book, just a good illustration of the fact that it's sort of open season right now, and that is something that we should be concerned about no matter what our political stripe might be, because we want our children to respect those in authority. When you're always making fun of the president, whoever that president might be, it's not a positive, is it?
No, it's not a positive. And, we're talking about something that is much more serious, much more extreme than simply, a joke by, Jimmy Kimmel or something like that. We're talking about things like, for example, your caller who was from Texas just right now. One of the examples I have in my book is of a teacher in Texas who, on Inauguration Day, projects an image of President Trump on the classroom wall, pulls out a water gun, and starts shooting at the image of President Trump, and starts yelling in the class in front of all the kids, "Die, die, die." And, so that's not a joke. That's something that is just absolutely beyond the pale. But it's also something that could be interpreted as a terroristic threat against the president.
Sure.
So if that's the kind of thing that teachers are willing to do in front of children, you have to wonder about the system that is producing these teachers, the type of system that allows teachers like that to be in the classroom.
Yes. Well, and one of the other callers from New Hampshire is a school resource officer, and he just called in to validate what you said about how so much of student-on-student crime is not being reported simply because the school doesn't want a black eye. So I'll take some more calls in just a minute, but I wanted to get to another issue that is in your book, and that is fiscal mismanagement. Okay, the largest school district in the country, Los Angeles Unified School District. You have a section on that. Tell us, unfortunately, the bad news about school mismanagement.
Well, I think that one of the things that we have to understand is that, first of all, yes, schools around the country are mismanaged and often mismanaged incredibly in a huge proportion. So in the case of Los Angeles, and then this is what's sad about it, is that they actually impaneled a group of experts to tell them about their fiscal situation. The panel then came back and, of course, told them that they were in very dire straits. And yet, despite this finding by their own panel of experts, the district then went out literally just a few months later and negotiated an extremely expensive union contract with the Service Employees Union to give full health care coverage to part-time workers there. And so, here you have this, and what's probably one of the worst parts about that is the fact that, this plan was adopted by the school board with virtually no discussion, no input from the public, and so therefore the fix was in basically because the Service Employees Union is a huge contributor to a lot of the school board members. So, that's the sort of thing that's happening in places like L.A., and the result is that the district is facing bankruptcy, certainly, facing hundreds of millions of dollars of debt, and a deficit over the next several years. And so how they're going to overcome that when they're employing these types of practices is anybody's guess.
Well, and again, you give all sorts of other examples from as far away as places like Pennsylvania and New Mexico and Michigan and Illinois. So it isn't just a California issue. As a matter of fact, that's just a symptom of a bigger problem, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And this is the thing that I wanted to make sure everybody understood in my book, The Corrupt Classroom, is that even though I am based in California, that this is not a book just about California examples. This is a book that speaks to the much larger national problem we're facing in each one of these different subject areas, whether it's bias in the classroom or fiscal mismanagement or school discipline and safety issues, bias in religion or sex ed. These are issues that cross state lines, cross over, red, blue lines. It crosses over all demographic lines that, we're facing right now.
Well, let's get into another chapter so that we can cover all of this, and that is the sexualization of the classroom. Now, we've talked about this before. We've had former proponents of Planned Parenthood, even some that ran various abortion clinics, who said that they would go into the classroom to, in some respects, lower the inhibitions young people have towards sex. And we've heard from those who wanted to teach, so-called comprehensive sex education. We've heard from some that have seen the attempt to try to normalize everything from LGBT behavior to a variety of others. So when we talk about this, it's not something we haven't heard before, but as you dug into this, you began to see how insidious it was. Can you kind of give us an overview of some of the issues that you began to understand were happening in the classroom as it relates to the teaching of sex?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to do is to show that this is not just a concern of people from, let's say, a more culturally conservative area, whether it might be in the South or some other part of what people might term the quote-unquote Bible Belt. That this is a concern that affects all Americans, and in fact, even in the most liberal areas of the country, this is something that worries parents. So, for example, in my book, I pick examples from the Silicon Valley, which is, if you were to ask people which is where the most liberal people might reside, you might think that, the Silicon Valley might be in the top 5 or so. And so, yet when very explicit sex ed curricula were being introduced in several of the towns in the Silicon Valley, the parents rose up and actually revolted. They didn't just, murmur and complain. They actually revolted against these textbooks because they were so explicit. As one parent said, they were teaching to perform, not to inform their kids. And so you had explicit instruction in, types of sex, including homosexual sex. There were, ninth grade students, middle school students, were being asked to, give their advice and opinion about situations in these textbooks involving college students. And in fact, some of the textbooks being pushed on these middle schoolers were geared to college-age children, but yet the local school districts there in the Silicon Valley wanted to push these very explicit curricula on middle schoolers. And thankfully, in the examples I note, that the parents did rise up and actually forced their school boards to back down. But the point of it is that it was often, in a very narrow votes. So, for example, in one of the cities I point to in the Silicon Valley, the curricula was pulled back on a 2-2 tie vote. A tie meant that the parents would win. But, what that meant is that one different vote would have meant that the parents would have lost, and then what would have been their recourse? They wouldn't have had any.
Sure.
Which is, again, why I think that if they had lost, then those parents should have had a school choice tool so that their kids wouldn't be exposed to this type of curricula that they vehemently disagreed with and felt that would be, not only did they disagree with, that they, that would be damaging to their child.
Well, again, one of the things we've talked about on this program before, as a matter of fact, one of the letters going out right now, I remind people of years ago where I had written about this particular textbook that I was concerned was showing up in the classrooms. And this one woman by the name of Lori said, I don't think it's that bad. She pulled out the book and she said, first of all, Kerby, it was worse than you said, because I always try to tame it down when I send out letters about that. And then she went in to complain, and the librarian said, well, your daughter has privacy. I can't tell you whether or not she's checked it out. She said, what do you mean? My 12-year-old, she has no privacy. And, of course, now there's some newer books coming out that are even worse. And so we've tried over the years to alert people to that. But as you point out, it all comes down to who you have on the school board and who's the librarian and who's the teacher, and all the more powerful argument for school choice. Let's take a break. We have a lot more to cover. We will do so and take some phone calls right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. You probably know the story of Aaron and Melissa Klein, the bakers in Oregon forced out of business and fined $135,000 by the state when they politely declined business that would have forced them to violate their religious convictions. What you may not know is that after the state of Oregon pronounced them guilty of discrimination, private citizens were eager to show their contempt for the Kleins. Many of the comments they received are so vulgar that I cannot repeat them here, but here is a tame sampling. One person writing on Facebook said to the Kleins, I hope your shop burns. Another chimed in, noting that she hoped Aaron and Melissa would burn in hell. One man sent a message that said, I hope you lose your house and have to live on the streets. One woman even said, we hope your children get cancer and die. When the government declares that citizens like Aaron and Melissa are not entitled to the Constitution's promises of religious liberty and free speech, its people push aside any goodwill that allows people to coexist peacefully with beliefs with which they may disagree. Aaron and Melissa have asked the Oregon Supreme Court to review their case. We hope the court will accept the appeal, if only to remind everyone that it is possible to live peacefully as neighbors, even when we disagree. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Some people think our religious freedom will soon be gone, but that's not true. The fact is that First Liberty, a national network of America's top attorneys, is winning over 90% of our cases. We defend religious freedom for people like you. Go to firstliberty.org and read the exciting story. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes as we talk with Lance Izumi about the book, The Corrupt Classroom. And let me go to another Lance listening on KBJS. We're going to be talking about this idea of religious bias. I think, Lance, your question fits perfectly right here. So what would you like to ask?
We homeschool, and I was wondering what the solution is. We know there's a problem. I've thought about having a Christian track and a secular humanist track, kind of like you have a college track now. I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but what would be the solution to this? And thank you.
Sure. What are your suggestions, Lance? Because a lot of people are saying, well, right now my tax dollars go to the public schools, and if I want to provide an alternative, in his case, he homeschools. Others might be able to go to a private school or a charter school or a parochial school, something like that. But this, I think, is a pretty profound argument for school choice, because try to see if you could get a Christian tract in the public schools right now. I can imagine the NEA and every group would be against you even trying to allow that to go into the public schools, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely right, Kerby. I mean, in fact, my chapter on religious bias in the public schools actually goes right to that question of the fact that there is not fairness when it comes to teaching the various religions. I think that most Americans, they don't necessarily want the public schools to simply teach about one religion to the exclusion of others. But if you're going to teach about religious beliefs, religious history, whatever, that you should give fair treatment to all the major religions. And that's the thing that most Americans are upset about when it comes to the performance of the public schools, because, as the examples I point out in my book, for example, in New Jersey and Maryland, that the public schools there were pushing teaching Islam and using tools and school type curricula in order to teach Islam to the exclusion of equal treatment for Judaism and for Christianity.
Yes.
And the parents who complained in those states, and in the case of the parents in Maryland, they actually filed a lawsuit. They're saying that it's not that we oppose, the schools, teaching about Islam, but when you actually ask, for example, in the case in Maryland, where you ask students there to say that Allah is God and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and they're forced to repeat that, and yet, like, for example, in New Jersey, where the parents of one of the kids who are complaining said that the school actually, while they were pushing the teaching about the 5 pillars of Islam, prevented that boy there in New Jersey from actually including a Bible verse, a very short Bible verse, in one of his school projects. Then what you're doing is you're stacking the deck. You're giving preference to one religion over another, and I think that's the problem Americans have, because Americans are by nature, I think, very fair-minded people for the most part, and when they see that happening, they are rightly, I think, repulsed by that. And I think in this case, while you can try and get, the school boards and the state departments of education to try and change their ways, that's going to be very difficult. It's much easier if every parent had that exit ticket, so when things like this happen and they want a fairer treatment of things such as religion, they can then take, whether it's a voucher or a savings account program or a tuition tax credit, and use that money so that they can take their child to a private school, for example, that will give them that better balance in their education.
And the original founder of Point of View is Marlon Maddox, and his book that came out after his death, Public Education Against America, that first chapter was some of the interviews we did around this table of a particular school district in the Contra Costa County area in California, near the San Francisco Bay Area, for people around the country that don't know the geography. And it proves 2 points. Number one, they weren't just teaching about religion, because you can teach about religion. The Supreme Court allowed that, but it was an indoctrination into religion. That's point number one, which you've already alluded to. And point number two, it made your case as well, because one of the interviews that we did, I think it was Penna Dexter did that interview, but Marlon later did the interview with one of the teachers at the school who did not even know that that was taking place in another part of the school. So think about this for a minute. You have, Lance, one teacher in one area of the school that does not know that another teacher is essentially indoctrinating students in Islam. So if a teacher in the same school, not just the same school district, in the same school building did not know what was going on in the classroom, imagine the chances of some of the parents knowing what's happening in the classroom, especially if you've got kids. I know I've had kids. When you come home and say, how was school? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing. You don't have a clue as to what's going on, and that's all the more reason why a lot of parents think that what is happening in the schools is something that they would agree with. But if they really found out or read your book, they'd understand why you're such a proponent of school choice.
Absolutely right. And I think it's important to say that, it's not necessarily just, Christians or Jewish kids and their parents who are upset about this. You could be from any other religion, but if one particular religion is being given preference, or one group is being given preference, then that's a problem. I point out in my book that in San Diego, the local school board there made an actual formal agreement with the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE, for an anti-bullying campaign. And the people who sued about that program was not a Christian group, but was an actual Asian American group for equality group. And they sued because they said that, look, there's lots of bullying going on campuses in San Diego, and why are we singling out only one group to receive the benefits, Muslim students, and why are we, why is the district, going into partnership with this one particular Islamic group, and that so all the other kids in the school district are not being covered and are not receiving the benefits of that anti-bullying money.
So again, some great material that is in the book. Let me just, before I let you go, mention that we do have a link to pacificresearch.org. And again, you have information on a variety of different issues. I love the latest one. 99% of the total electric car tax credits are claimed by households with more than $50,000 of income, Again, costly subsidies for the rich, and just one of many great research articles. But as people go to pacificresearch.org, Lance, what do they find there?
They're going to find, the whole panoply of our different studies and research. If they're interested in my research in education, there's a tab for issues, and you just click on the education tab, and all my work will pop up. You'll be able to see the links to the Corrupt Classroom. My most recent publication is called An American Education Agenda, where I make my top 15 recommendations for improving education in the country. They'll see all my articles. So go to pacificresearch.org, and they can get copies of the book. And as you mentioned, too, they can get a copy of Corrupt Classroom on Amazon.com.
Again, great book, about 30 pages of endnotes. So again, lots of great material that we've covered today on bias and the unsafe environment, fiscal mismanagement, the sexualization of the classroom, and religious bias. Lance, we appreciate the good work that you do and all the work that is done there at Pacific Research Institute. Looking forward to the next opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, Kerby. It's always a great pleasure to be on your show, and my best wishes for everybody for a happy Easter.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we have a lot more to cover. So if you'd like to join us, that number is 1-800-351-1212. Wayne Pederson will be with us. We'll talk about the International Day for the Unreached. Lou Holtz, Coach Lou Holtz, dropping by, and we'll get a chance to hear from him. So I think you'll have a lot of fun. And, of course, as we get into the second to the last day, we certainly do encourage you to focus on this Easter week, this Holy Week, and so we encourage you to find some of those resources on our website as well. Let's take a break. We have a lot more to cover. We will do that right after these important messages.
From Affirm Films, the studio that brought you Risen and War Room, comes Paul, Apostle of Christ. Two men challenged an empire in order to live out the gospel of Jesus Christ and spread their message to the world.
Where sin abounds, grace abounds more.
Starring Jim Caviezel. Paul, Apostle of Christ. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Now playing. More information is available at paulmovie.com.
Few of us get the chance to really make a difference, but today you have an opportunity. The question is whether you will seize it. Becoming a Truth Team partner with Point of View magnifies your impact in this generation and perhaps for many to come. When you stop what you're doing and call us or give online, you invest in hard work that has changed lives and communities for 45 years. Grab this opportunity. Call 800-347-5151 or visit pointofview.net/team. Don't let this opportunity pass by. Join the team and make a difference. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
This hour, we're going to spend some time talking about the unreached people around the world and put this in context. If you were listening to our broadcast yesterday, we do a millennial roundtable. And of course, we had Nick Pitts with us and we had Brent Taylor with us. And we talked about one of the really sobering statistics is that according to the George Barna survey, a majority of church members, not just a majority of Americans, a majority of church members did not know really what the Great Commission was. Some misidentified it, others had never heard of it, others did not know. And that is really disturbing, first of all. So we're going to be talking about this idea of the Great Commission. But more importantly, we're also going to be talking about the rather sobering statistics that over 2 billion people have never heard the gospel. And the number of people beyond the reach of the gospel are actually increasing every year, because their growth, at least the growth of the unevangelized, is going faster than the evangelism taking place. And so each year we like to focus on the International Day for the Unreached. We have some information on our website about this. In the past, we've had Steve Johnson with us, and more recently, over the last couple of years, I think we've had Wayne Pederson with us. And if you're not familiar with him, individual that actually was at KTIS in Minneapolis, and then later, of course, was the executive director of the Christian Music Broadcasters, president of the Mission America Coalition, hired at Moody Broadcasting, and then served as the president of HCJB Global, which is now called Reach Beyond, and now serves as the global ambassador for Reach Beyond. And Wayne Pederson, always great to have you on the program with us.
Well, thank you, Kerby. Sounds like I just can't keep a job very long.
No, you have. You and I are old enough that we've actually been able to do a lot of different kinds of things, but you and I have crossed paths in so many different ways, and I am so impressed with what is available on the website, International Day for the Unreached, because one of the things I tell Wayne is for people to watch the video. And there is a nice video for people to watch. It's about a minute and a half long, and that will give them a chance to kind of understand that. Then maybe hit the share button, put it on their Facebook page, or send it to their pastor, their missions pastor, if they're not aware of that. Maybe post it on a Twitter page. But give us some of the facts and figures, because when we talk about this, we were kind of shocked yesterday to realize how many people don't even know what the Great Commission is. And I think even fewer people know how many unreached people groups we still have around the world.
Well, you're right, Kerby, and I found out those same statistics just in the last week. It's shocking. You know, when a person gives their final words before they die, you pay attention. And Jesus' final words before he went to heaven was what we call today the Great Commission, to go into all the world, to every people group, and preach the gospel. Judea, Samaria, the uttermost parts of the earth. And to find out that more than half of believers in Christian churches aren't aware of the Great Commission is rather shocking, and points to the need for the Day for the Unreached, because the reason that we called this coalition together is to raise the awareness of the North American church for the cause of the unreached. There's basically 40% of the humanity around the world that is considered unreached. 1,300 ethno-linguistic groups, over 100,000, that are unreached people groups with no non-believers, no churches, and no Bibles in their language. So of all the issues that were mentioned at the top of the program, I think this is one of the key issues of the church today. What are we going to do about the 2.8 billion people around the world that have yet to hear a presentation of the gospel.
Let's talk about some of the resources, too, along the way. There is a free download, an action guide. You even have kind of an Unreached of the Day opportunity for people to become an advocate. Talk about, first of all, how we can get involved individually, and then in a minute I want to talk about how churches can get involved, because I know we have a lot of pastors and Sunday school teachers and Bible fellowship leaders. But just for a minute, any listener right now, what can he or she do to address this incredible, really kind of overwhelming problem of the unreached?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned, Kirby, is so important, is just to go to the website and learn. It starts with creating an awareness of the importance of the Great Commission to preach the gospel to the uttermost parts of the earth, and to explore what some of the challenges and opportunities are. So you can learn, you can explore, you can pray. And part of the reason for this devotional book, this 30-day devotional book, is to help people pray for some of the unreached people groups around the world. Pray specifically for them by name, whether it's the Rohingya or the Fulani or whatever we're talking about here. We can pray specifically that the Lord of the harvest would send workers into that part of the world. And then, of course, they can communicate and share. We hope that pastors, mission committee chairs, will work to create a greater awareness among the congregations for the cause of the unreached. You know, we have Day for the Persecuted Church and Day for Right to Life for the Unborn, but this is one of the important issues, too, a huge number of unreached people groups around the world. So if you have a position of responsibility or influence in your church or your Sunday school class to create an awareness of the unreached people groups, then you can give, although financial is not a big priority in this whole project. Awareness is the big priority. And then besides give, you can go. And once the Lord has placed on the heart of his people the need for the unreached around the world, many college students during their summer break, spring break, many retired persons can do their post-career meaningful work by going and serving in some capacity among the unreached people groups. And you can find out more about all of these ways to get involved on dayfortheunreached.org. That's dayfortheunreached, one word, .org.
And I might just mention we have that link on the website. Again, dayfortheunreached.org. First of all, let me just mention the date. It's May 20th. And you might say, well, why are you talking about it here in March? Well, first of all, I thought during Holy Week would be a great time to talk about the unreached, as we're thinking tomorrow about the cross and then Sunday about the resurrection, and that seemed appropriate. But second of all, Wayne, I really wanted people to build some momentum. I know that sometimes things move a little slow in churches and groups and things like that. So here you have a chance to now know about this and really have almost 2 months to really kind of prepare and make this a really special event. I know of churches that have had special sermons on this. I know that they've had outreaches. They've used videos. They've had displays. And all of that takes a little bit of time. And so we're giving you an advance warning before this International Day for the Unreached on May 20th.
Yes, well, I know pastors plan months and weeks in advance. This year it's May 20th, which is Pentecost Sunday, and that's not an accident. Last year was June 4th on Pentecost Sunday. This year it's earlier, May 20th. And how appropriate on the day in the first century where people from every known nation and country and tribe in the known world at that time came to Jerusalem and heard the good news of Jesus Christ for the first time in their very own language. And so we're using Pentecost Sunday as a time in the 21st century to remind Christians in North America of the need to present the good news of Jesus Christ in every known language around the world. And that's why we're working with some of these other organizations, 11 or 12 organizations that have banded together to make the good news known.
We're going to take a break. We'll continue our conversation with Wayne Pederson. By the way, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll come back and take some calls and continue our conversation right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, more and more Americans believe in pluralism, and many believe in universalism. First, let me define the terms.
Universalism would be the belief that everyone will be saved after death and go to heaven. Pluralism is the belief that all faith positions and belief systems are equally true or essentially true. According to a Barna survey, Americans are still not embracing universalism. A majority of Americans still believe in exclusive views rather than inclusive views concerning heaven. Those surveyed were asked if they agreed or disagreed with a statement, quote, all people will experience the same outcome after death, regardless of their religious beliefs, unquote. Americans disagreed with the statement by 55%. The survey shows that Americans still reject the idea that everyone is saved, but the declining percentages suggest that universalism may become the dominant theological view in the next few years. Given the influence of tolerance and political correctness, it is reasonable to assume that universalism will become more prevalent over time. What about pluralism? The survey asked if Americans agreed or disagreed with this statement, quote, it doesn't matter what religious faith you follow because they all teach the same lesson, unquote. A majority disagreed with the statement, although 43% agreed with the statement. The study also found that 59% of adults believe that Christians and Muslims worship the same God even though they have different names and beliefs regarding God, and the study also found that 43% believe that the Bible, the Quran, and the Book of Mormon are all different expressions of the same spiritual truths. Pluralism is already becoming the dominant theology of Americans. Pastors and Christian leaders should take note and address the influence of pluralism in our world today. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Affirm Films, Paul, Apostle of Christ, starring Jim Caviezel, rated PG-13, now playing. Information at paulmovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Continue our conversation for a few more minutes with Wayne Pederson, talking about the International Day for the Unreached. Let me, if I can, ask if you would like to join our conversation for just a minute. Love to know what your church is doing right now to mobilize individuals to pray for the unreached groups, to mobilize individuals for missions. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212, or else just sit back and listen to a little bit more of some of the action items we want to give to you. This weekend, of course, we celebrate the resurrection. But what happens after the resurrection? Pentecost. And this very important day, May 20th, on Pentecost, a time to renew our vision of hope for all the nations, and an opportunity to remind all of us that there is a real need for us to begin to get serious about the Great Commission, to reach out to that more than 2 billion individuals that have never heard the gospel. And so there are some great resources, but let's start talking about those. You mentioned a few as we came to the break, Wayne, but one that I might recommend is that you had a 60-minute broadcast last year with our good friend David Platt and others, who actually, I think, put together something that could be used as video clips inside a church or could be shown ahead of time of May 20th. But talk about what resources might be available for a church if they really want to make May 20th a very important day in their church calendar.
Well, thank you, Kerby. I'm looking at the website right now, dayfortheunreached.org. There are bulletin inserts, PDFs of bulletin inserts that pastors, Christian leaders can use on May 20th. There's a FAQ, frequently asked questions that followers of Christ need to know about the opportunities and challenges out there. There's a Facebook cover image that can be used. And there's a Great Commission Action Guide, and these are available. You can download and print them yourself, a free resource. There's a manifesto for the Unreached that many churches and Christian groups and individuals have adopted and adapted. In addition to that, there are promo videos that can be used in church. There's a sermon outline. If someone would like some help in preparing a message on this, there's a sermon outline with some facts and figures that can help you. Web banners, infographics, videos, PSAs for radio stations they can use. So unlimited number of resources. They're all free and downloadable at our website. And what you mentioned on May 20th, of course, last year we had the podcast with David Platt. This year we have Phil Stacy on with us. And we're going to be hearing from a majority of the leaders of the coalition, the members of the mission organizations that are focused on unreached people groups. And so we'll hear from Bible from the World and OC and a number of other organizations, hear from their leaders about what they're doing and how they're challenging us to get involved in the cause to bring the gospel of Christ to the unreached people groups. So the best I can say, Kerby, is just go to the website and you'll find all kinds. There's an app you can download.
Right.
And the app will give you every day a country you can pray for. And today it's for the Kapali people of Bangladesh, 208,000 people, 0% evangelical.
Wow. You know, and one of the things I might ask for you, just in your personal experience as being with HCJB, now called Reach Beyond, you've had a chance to interact with some of these individuals that have heard the gospel for the first time, been in contact with some of these unreached people groups, and share a little bit about your own experience there as well, because that is, I think, one of those experiences that we could sort of multiply. And like you said, if you are a missionary and you get to go to some of these places and present the gospel to people that have never heard even the name Jesus, you begin to really catch a vision for the Great Commission, don't you?
Well, I can't name a country because it's an unreached, undisclosed country that great restrictions to the gospel. And this young man started to listen to broadcasts from Reach Beyond in Arabic on his personal computer, on his laptop computer. He was streaming the programming with his headphones on. And one time his brother came into his room and saw what he was doing and told his father. Well, his father was very, very angry, and he took this young man, beat him, kicked him out of the house in just his underwear and said, "Don't ever come back." This young man wandered the streets late at night, homeless, without clothes, without food, saw a light on in a person's house, knocked at the door. It happened to be a Christian family in a largely unreached country. They invited him in, took him in, fed him, clothed him, brought him to their little small house church. And that young man now is himself producing radio programs to reach his countrymen in that undisclosed country with the gospel of Christ. This is just one example of so many Muslims are coming to Christ each day. 80% of them are coming to Christ through media, through technology.
Yeah, we've talked about that with Joe Rosenberg and a variety of others. I'll just share one of my stories. One of my colleagues was actually presenting the gospel to this particular village. And after, talking for some time about Jesus and what he has done for them and all the rest, finally one of the people in the village said, "Well, we want to meet this person, Jesus. Which one of you is Jesus?" And I just,
what a compliment.
Yeah, but again, it was also just kind of an understanding that, we take for granted that everybody, even unchurched people, have an understanding of the gospel, which of course is not true. But when you go into some of these countries, they don't have any concept of a eternal God, of God becoming man in the person of Jesus Christ. They have no concept of all the things that we take for granted. And so, if anything, that should really challenge us to really want to present the gospel. And it so happens that today my commentary, which some people might have heard just a minute ago, which we air at kind of the quarter after the hour, is on pluralism. And we look right now at the fact that even more and more Americans are starting to say, well, Christians and Muslims, we worship the same God. The Bible, the Quran, the Book of Mormon, they all teach different expressions of same spiritual truth. So you don't have to go too far before you reach people and interact with people that in some respects have a faulty understanding of the gospel. Right, Wayne?
Yeah, and this is one of the great impediments to mission work today is the soft universalism that's spreading in our culture and even into the Christian church, is that all roads lead to heaven. And we know from Jesus' own words, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. And, if the other were true, that all will end up in the same place, why bother to do missions work and do education and evangelism and discipleship and humanitarian aid? Because we all end up in the same place. But according to the words of Christ, that's not true. Narrow is the way that leads to life, and broad the way that leads to destruction. So by bringing these ministries together, and you mentioned Joel Rosenberg. We were just with Joel last night here in Colorado Springs. And to hear what's happening in the so-called unreached countries is phenomenal. Israel, Jordan, even Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt. It's just amazing in some of these places where the gospel has been for both. The Holy Spirit is working in unusual ways. So even though we're concerned about these 2 billion people on the other side, there are multitudes coming to Christ around the world in some of the most persecuted places in the world. North Korea, Iran, Iraq, and on and on. So there's a lot to be encouraged about, but there's a lot to be done. The top-hanging fruit still has to be reached.
For sure. Again, as you watch the video, you'll see only 1% of church resources go to the unreached. We aren't oftentimes praying for them. We aren't going to them. So this is why we are focusing some time and attention today on what's going to happen more than 40 days from now. But it will be, again, May 20th. 2018, International Day of the Unreached. And Wayne Pederson, it's always great to have you on the program to once again remind us of that. So again, my assignment to you is to watch the video. It's only a minute and a half long. Then on the right-hand side, you see where it says share. So post it somewhere, send it to somebody, put it on your Facebook page, put it on your Twitter feed, whatever. Then under menu, click on the part that says resources. And as Wayne shared just a minute ago, there are all sorts of resources for you as an individual, and most importantly, all sorts of resources your church can do to really begin to focus some attention on this International Day for the Unreached. So, Wayne, first of all, I wanted to wish you a happy Easter. Thank you for joining us during this Holy Week.
Well, thank you, Kerby, and for all the issues that you take on. I appreciate that so much. But thank you for giving attention to this eternal issue about the destiny of people around the world with their souls. And Kerby, the Lord is risen.
That's a great way to end this segment. And so let me do so. Again, the day for the unreached.org. We have links on our website, and we will do that. And I had a chance earlier today to have interviewed Coach Lou Holtz. He's going to be in the Dallas area, and I thought you might enjoy that. So when we come back, we're going to get a little bit of common sense and some great homespun perspective from Coach Lou Holtz. And so that will be a way we'll kind of wind down this program for today. All that coming up right after these important messages.
From PureFlix comes God's Not Dead, a light in darkness. Even in life's darkest valleys, a small flame can light the way toward healing and hope.
We are called to be a light in the darkness.
Starring David A.R. White and John Corbett.
God's Not Dead.
God's Not Dead, a light in darkness. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. In theaters March 30th. More information is available at godsnotdead.com.
Christians are called to have answers. Answers for those who doubt our faith and answers for those going through difficult times. Thanks to our Truth Team members, Point of View provides those answers. You can play a vital role in bringing truth to the pressing issues of our day and truth when life doesn't seem fair. Help shine a light in darkness by giving today. Call 800-347-5151 or visit pointofview.net/team. Do not miss or minimize how much of a difference you can make. Take just a couple of minutes and join the Truth Team. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Earlier today, I had a chance to interview Coach Lou Holtz, and since he was coming to the Dallas area, I thought it would be fun to give you a chance to hear from him. He's going to be actually doing something in the Dallas area. I know most of you probably can't attend it, but it was something that will be taking place April 15th. But I've always appreciated his perspective and certainly his kind of benefit of the doubt that he gives to individuals and his encouragement and some of the things he lives by. So I thought for just a minute you might like to hear the interview I did earlier today with Coach Lou Holtz, who, as you may know, served as the head coach of the, first of all, the College of William and Mary. You'll hear him talk about the fact that he said we probably had more Marys than Williams. Then it was North Carolina State and University of Arkansas, University of Minnesota. Then he was perhaps best known for being the coach of the University of Notre Dame. He was there for 10 years. Later at the University of South Carolina, compiled a career record of 249 wins, 132 losses, 7 ties. Perhaps the pinnacle, though, was in 1988 when his Notre Dame team went 12-0 with a victory in the Fiesta Bowl and was the consensus national champion. But he's the only coach, only college football coach, to lead 6 different programs to bowl games and the only coach to guide 4 different programs to the final top 20 rankings. So anyway, I began by pointing out that one of the most watched videos of him is at a commencement ceremony where he said, "I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth." And he said, "I knew I had plenty to eat because when I asked my dad for seconds, he said, 'You've had plenty.'" But in light of really kind of the humble circumstances he came from, I wanted him to maybe talk a little bit about his upbringing.
Well, I was born during the Depression, and I was born in a cellar by Dr. McGraw. I wasn't born in a hospital. They didn't have hospitalization then. My dad had a third-grade education, but he also had a lot of common sense. I remember I was a little boy, and I fell and tore the only pair of pants I had. It tore a hole in it. He told me to tear my knee. That'll grow back. The pants won't. But as I said, I was born in the Depression. My dad had a third-grade education, and we lived in a cellar. We had one bedroom for my sister, myself, and my parents, a kitchen and a half bath. The half bath did not have a tub, a shower, or a sink. We lived there for 7.5 years. There was no welfare. There was no food stamps. There was no safety net. The reason I say I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth because of what I was taught. First of all, I was born in this country. And I was taught if I got an education and worked hard and didn't blame other people, that I could lead a very happy and successful life. And so it's not what you had, it's what you were taught. I was taught the value of hard work, about saving the money you might be able to earn, et cetera, and take responsibility for the choices you make. And so that's why I say I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, so much better than people that had a lot more financial welfare, but the fact of what I was taught.
Yes. You know, you have a number of rules, but I know one that you say that you followed is do the right thing, do the best you can, always show people you care. Can you share with us maybe how you've applied that to your life?
Well, that has been the whole basis of our life. And I've spoken all over the world, basically, on those 3 rules. And what I did was I was at William and Mary, and I left there from Ohio State. We'd won the national championship, and I go there. I think I have all the answers. The first year was a disaster. I tried to be Woody Hayes and be Ohio State without their players. We had more Marys than we had Williams. But I looked down. I took a group of people that were very, very successful from all walks of life I knew, whether it be fellow players, coaches, teachers, business people, or friends. And I took a group that really you didn't like to be around an awful lot. And what was the difference? There wasn't a difference in age or intelligence or sex or religion. The only difference was the people that did the right thing that you could trust all the time. They also were the type that whatever they did to the very best of their ability, and they always cared about other people. They walked in the room, their attitude was, "Hey, there you are, how can I help you?" Not, "Hey, here I am, look at me, it's all about me." The group wasn't very successful. You couldn't trust them. If they said something, you couldn't take it to the bank. They cut corners and everything they did, and they only cared about themselves. And so I came up with those 3 rules. And what those 3 rules do, and in all these years, I've never needed a 4th rule. Every relationship has got to be based on trust. You cannot have trust with people if both parties do not do the right thing. I also must say that you cannot have trust without having transparency. Why don't we trust our government? Because there's no transparency. My wife and I have been married 57 years this summer. That we have complete transparency. There's no secrets between it. And so if you do the right thing, you're going to build trust. If you do everything to the best of your ability, then people are going to know you're totally committed to excellence. It's not about slogans or about this. It's about doing everything the best you can. And the last thing that people want to know, do you care about me? So those 3 rules build a trust, they build a commitment, they build a care. And then what I just say, that has been the basis of our coaching. There's a statue of it at Notre Dame. There's 3 words on the pedestal: trust, commitment, love. I didn't put them there. The players put them there. Notre Dame put them there because that's what we believe. Now, when you have those 3 rules, and if somebody violated them, which they often did, you sit down. You say, I don't believe you're doing the best you can in Spanish 2. Here's why. You got an A in Spanish 1, a D in Spanish 2. You missed class 3 times, study all twice, 2 to 1. I don't believe that's the best you can do. You never attack the performer, but you must attack the performance. And life is nothing more than making good choices. There's 400,000 words plus in the English vocabulary, and I didn't count them, nor do I know them. But the most important word by far is the word choice. And if you make good choices, your self-esteem goes up. There are 2 types of people: those that pull other people down and those that lift people up. The people that have a poor self-image are the ones that are always criticizing everybody else, trying to pull them down. And what I found, you follow those 3 rules, your self-image goes up.
Outstanding. So again, do the right thing, do the best you can, and always show people you care. We're, of course, talking with Coach Lou Holtz. And, you know, one of the things, Coach, that I notice is many people that call into my radio program kind of complain about their situation. And yet one of your other very famous lines is, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it. It seems to me that's a real secret to life that we need to teach once again to our generation, don't we?
Well, I definitely do. I think today we're celebrating my wife's 80th birthday, and all her children are coming in, and we're making a big deal because she's having some health problems at the present time. But to give you a prime example of how we not only talk about that, we try to live it. June 22nd, 2015, I was awakened at 2:30 in the morning with a smoke alarm. And I awakened my wife, and we got out with our bathrobes, nothing else. The fire department came, a couple fire trucks. They had some water pressure. The house burned to the ground. We lost everything that we had. I mean, it burned completely to the ground. It was a beautiful home, I might add. And there we are, 8 o'clock in the morning. There's nothing but smoldering ashes. And my wife's crying, and rightfully so. And I said to her, I said, honey, you have 24 hours to cry, to wallow in self-pity, to feel sorry for yourself. But come 8 o'clock Monday morning, we're never going to look back. We're never going to say, what if, why us? All we're going to do is we're going to go to bigger and better. We're going to move forward. We're never going to look back and complain. And we live in a home now. She designed it. She's very, very religious. She built the whole house around her little chapel that she has. And she said to me, maybe 2 months ago, she said, I wish the house had burned down a couple of years earlier because she built the home that she wanted. But it's just how we try to approach it. I can't change it. As somebody once said, may God give me the courage to change the things I can, the serenity to accept the things I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two. We couldn't do anything about it. The house burned down. That's a fact. It was lightning. There wasn't anything we could do. We're fortunate we got out. I'm on record. I awakened her. I'm not sure she would awaken me, but that remains to be seen. But the fact is that we moved forward and we turned it into a very, very positive thing for us.
And again, just a good illustration that, life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how to respond to it. And so we have a little bit more from Lou Holtz in just a minute. But one of the reasons I did this was he will be here in the Dallas area on April 15th. I don't know that many of you will be in that area, but if you wanted to drive over or you happen to be in the Dallas area on April 15th, you'd have a chance to hear him, but perhaps you'll hear him in your own local community sometime. I thought you'd just enjoy hearing from him for just a few minutes. We come back, want to talk a little bit more about this issue of sports, because when you think about this, he has, of course, not only been a coach, but a sports commentator and really kind of a motivational speaker now. And so I appreciate our people and friends at Fellowship of Christian Athletes that are bringing him in to speak, and you may want to have him speak at your venue as well. And just a great opportunity to catch him on his wife's 80th birthday today. He was able to pull over just long enough, talk on the phone from his car to share a little bit with us, and I thought this would be an encouragement to you. We'll come back and talk a little bit more and hear a little bit more from Coach Lou Holtz. All that coming up right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. You probably know the story of Aaron and Melissa Klein, the bakers in Oregon forced out of business and fined $135,000 by the state when they politely declined business that would have forced them to violate their religious convictions. What you may not know is that after the state of Oregon pronounced them guilty of discrimination, private citizens were eager to show their contempt for the Kleins. Many of the comments they received are so vulgar that I cannot repeat them here, but here is a tame sampling. One person writing on Facebook said to the Kleins, "I hope your shop burns." Another chimed in, noting that she hoped Aaron and Melissa would burn in hell. One man sent a message that said, "I hope you lose your house and have to live on the streets." One woman even said, "We hope your children get cancer and die." When the government declares that citizens like Aaron and Melissa are not entitled to the Constitution's promises of religious liberty and free speech, its people push aside any goodwill that allows people to coexist peacefully with beliefs with which they may disagree. Aaron and Melissa have asked the Oregon Supreme Court to review their case. We hope the court will accept the appeal, if only to remind everyone that it is possible to live peacefully as neighbors, even when we disagree. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Some people think our religious freedom will soon be gone, but that's not true. The fact is that First Liberty, a national network of America's top attorneys, is winning over 90% of our cases. We defend religious freedom for people like you. Go to firstliberty.org and read the exciting story. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, and an interview I did earlier today with Coach Lou Holtz, of course, best known for leading that Notre Dame team to a 12-0 victory and becoming the consensus national champions. But again, some other things that he has been involved with more recently as a sports commentator, motivational speaker, and the rest. But I thought, since we were talking about sports, this would be an opportunity to maybe have some of his perspectives on really some of these scandals involving sports and really how Christians can interact with that. You know, we've had a number of scandals in the sports world, and I know you're going to be speaking for a Fellowship of Christian Athletes here in Dallas. Can Can you maybe talk about the importance of character and a Christian influence in sports? Because we certainly seem to need that today, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Whether we're talking about sports or whether we're talking about business, it all comes down to character and integrity. You know, people say to me, Coach, what's the difference between athletes today and 40 years ago? Well, today everybody wants to talk about their rights and their privileges. 40 years ago, we talked about our obligations and our responsibilities. You join a business, you join the military, you join a team, you bring a child in the world, you join a spouse. You have obligation, you have responsibilities, and you don't have the right to cause other people to fail because you don't do everything to the very best of your ability. And when we talk about sportsmanship, I just can't stand it when people showboat and try to put the other person down by their actions, et cetera, because I know the sacrifices that those other players on that other side of the field have made. I know the pain that they've gone through in order giving up summers, the sacrifices they made. Let's show respect for them. But the problem is, before you can show respect for other people, you have to show respect for yourself. The one thing that we were taught at home and was reinforced in the schools, and I sometimes no longer taught today, or certainly reinforced in the schools, is respect. Respect for your parents, respect for elders, respect for teachers, respect for coaches, respect for the law. And I can't begin to tell you that every time I went in to recruit a young man, particularly at Notre Dame, I insisted I go into his home and meet his parents because I wanted to see the respect they showed their parents. If they didn't show great respect to their parents, they weren't going to succeed at Notre Dame, and they were going to be a difficult problem to cope with. And so, once again, you go back to those three rules. Do the right thing, but also do the very best you can and show people you care. And that's not only your teammates, that's the other people as well. And I just say this, take two people. Take somebody you love, admire, and respect, and somebody you got a problem with. Put these three questions on both people. Can you trust them, yes or no? They commit yes or no. Do they care, yes or no? I guarantee the person you admire and respect, you said yes to all three questions. The person you got a problem with, you pinpointed the problem. If they can't trust them, they aren't committed, they don't care. I think that so many of the young people do not have the leadership at home. Many of them don't have parents, et cetera. I'm working with Ben Carson and President Trump of trying to get people in the inner cities to make good choices, and we're in the process trying to figure out how we can best do that, because I tell you, you really help people once they have good sportsmanship and treat other people the right way and have a good positive attitude and belief. Those three rules create that environment.
Let's talk about that for just a minute, because as you have already alluded, many young people today in this younger generation don't seem to understand sportsmanship. And yet, of course, we're talking about Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and there's where you can provide, I think, a context for a positive male role model, which I think a lot of these young people need. So how can we begin maybe working with groups like that to provide that role model, since many of them don't have a man in the home to really teach them respect and sportsmanship and character and the kinds of things that are going to help them be successful?
Well, I think that's also the obligation of every teacher and coach to do that as well. And people want discipline, they want hard work. Sometimes they don't exactly know how to do it. I first became associated with the FCA back in the, early 60s when I was coaching for Paul Dietz. So he is very strong in the FCA. We went up to Black Mountain. I took my 4 children up there and my wife. And it was a great experience. It's I just believe that I have a strong faith in God. I'm not saying what anybody else should do. I make that choice myself. As I mentioned, life's nothing more than the choices you're going to make. And how can you possibly not believe in God when you look at an individual? You know, people can hear me because of the fibers, or they see me, the receptors in their eyes. Or you think about the blood, and you think about the brain, you think about the reproductive system. You could tell me that just happened by chance, or we consider the fact that 11 of the 12 apostles died as martyrs. They aren't going to die for a lie. I just look, and God doesn't solve problems for you, but God gives you the ability to handle them. And I think that the Fellowship of Christian Athletes is trying to get an individual to understand the proper way to act, the proper way to treat, and remember why we're here. I think Mark Twain said it best. He said the two most important days in your life, one's the day you're born, and the other is the day you discover why you're born. When we discover, and particularly millennials, that we weren't born just for ourselves, we're born basically to help other people, our life will change for the better.
We have been talking with Coach Lou Holtz. Of course, he's going to be speaking for Fellowship of Christian Athletes in the Dallas area, April 15th. And, Coach, I appreciate you giving us some time today, and Lord bless you during this Holy Week.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, again, just the interview that we did earlier today. And, again, if you are not supporting your local Fellowship of Christian Athletes, let me encourage you to do so. For those of you that might be in the Dallas area, let me just mention you can go to dfwfca.org, and it's part of actually the Landry program. And there, of course, they have the golf tournament, and they have this on a Sunday. But I recognize most of you probably won't have a chance to attend that, but maybe you'll be able to go to an event where he'll be speaking in the future. And if nothing else, just as we kind of wind down this Holy Week, just a real opportunity to focus on what was important. And I love some of his sayings. You know, you have a lot of Zig Ziglar sayings. There's a fair number of Lou Holtz sayings. Do the right thing, do the best you can, always show people that you care. Those are 3 rules to live by, and he certainly has lived by those over these many years as well, in terms of trust and terms of integrity and competence. And then, of course, the one he shared, I mean, just imagine losing your home. And again, like you said, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% what you respond to it. And so that's just a good way to kind of wind down this very important week. Tomorrow, of course, we're going to have a repeat program because it is Good Friday. And, of course, we encourage you to attend church on Sunday or maybe even Saturday. There are a lot of different options for you to do so. And let me encourage you to not only to focus on the crucifixion, but as well on the resurrection. And if we can be a help in that regard, certainly that is the case. And if you've been listening to this program and have never trusted Jesus Christ as your Savior, you could do it even right now before the broadcast ends in the quietness of your heart. And certainly I would encourage you to do so. There is certainly a need for us to bring the gospel around the world, as we've talked about with Wayne Pederson. More than 2 billion people have not heard the gospel. But, there are people, even some listening to this broadcast, and certainly people that you know across the street from you, down the road from you, who need the gospel. So don't wait to go all the way over to another part of the world to share the gospel. You can share it in your own neighborhood, and there are people that need to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. Well, that's all we have for today. Of course, next week we're going to get back into all sorts of items in the news. I know Josh McDowell's going to be with us. We'll be talking about his new book. And, of course, there are just a number of other topics that we always try to address here on Point of View, because we talk about your faith, your family, or your freedom. So, again, I hope you'll enjoy the taped broadcast tomorrow. And then, of course, we'll see you back here next week for our live programs. I want to thank Andrew and Steve for their help behind the scenes. I want to thank Lance Izumi and Wayne Pederson and even Coach Lou Holtz for all that they brought. Have a great day. See you back here on Monday.
From Affirm Films, the studio that brought you Risen and War Room, comes Paul, Apostle of Christ. 2 men challenged an empire in order to live out the gospel of Jesus Christ and spread their message to the world.
Where sin abounds, grace abounds more.
Starring Jim Caviezel. Paul, Apostle of Christ. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Now playing. More information is available at paulmovie.com.
Few of us get the chance to really make a difference, but today you have an opportunity. The question is whether you will seize it. Becoming a Truth Team partner with Point of View magnifies your impact in this generation and perhaps for many to come. When you stop what you're doing and call us or give online, you invest in hard work that has changed lives and communities for 45 years. Grab this opportunity. Call 800-347-5151 or visit pointofview.net/team. Don't let this opportunity pass by. Join the team and make a difference. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.